Today, there are big changes to what a homeowners association can require of people who live in communities governed by one. A new law is now establishing rules that HOAs must now follow, and they impact just about everyone who lives in one of these communities. Adam Thorson is the division chief of the Consumer Advocacy Unit of Jacksonville Area Legal Aid and is joining us this morning to kind of help break down what's in this law. You know, I printed it off. It's pretty lengthy. There's a lot of, small fine print in here. So let's try to dig into this as much as we can, because
Sure.
As a member of the I-Team, I know we receive, and I've come and interviewed you a couple of times, we've received a lot of complaints specifically from people who live in HOAs who frequently say to us, Adam, I didn't know that that was a rule. I didn't know that was a problem. So given that, and you've read through this, what's your initial reaction to what you're reading in the new law?
Right. So, my initial reaction is I'm pleased. There's millions of homeowners that live in HOA communities in Florida. And I think what really, there's a couple of new bills, as you said. They're long, they're in-depth. But I think the heart of these is they increase accountability for board members. They increase visibility so people actually know what they're getting into, so they're aware of these rules and regulations. And in a lot of cases, these laws actually lessen the ability of the HOA to fine you for certain things that maybe they could in the past. So yeah. I think it's a win for homeowners and just having that information.
And I think that's what a lot of the feedback we get is for example, leaving your garbage can out. So let's get into some of these things first. So would you explain the types of things that HOAs can no longer issue fines or suspensions for residents?
Sure. So there's three main things. So the first one would be garbage receptacles. So now you have sort of a 48-hour window, 24 hours before the pickup and then 24 hours after the pickup, where the HOA can't fine you if you leave that garbage can outside during that time window. The second main thing then is holiday decorations. And so you have instances you hear about neighbors saying, oh man, they've still got these holiday decorations up and it's 6 months later. And hey, maybe that's a problem. Maybe some people don't want that. But what this new law says is that you can't be fined for that until you've gotten 7 days written notice to take down those decorations. So it gives you a little bit of time after you're notified by your HOA.
And then the other is parking. And I find that this is a big one, actually,
yes.
Because, again, we get a lot of feedback from our viewers about something like this. And it's specifically the types of vehicles you're allowed to park in your driveway or even along the right-of-way, essentially kind of in the street.
That's right. And so all associations are different, but a lot of them did have rules that said even if it was your personal vehicle, you could not park, let's say, a pickup truck in your driveway. You had to have that in the garage. You had to have that stowed away. So under this new law, HOAs are not allowed to prohibit the parking of pickup trucks in your driveway. And additionally, if you have a work vehicle that's been issued to you from your employer, you're also allowed to park that in the driveway. And then there's actually some additional carve-outs for first responders. So used to law enforcement officers, they could park their vehicles not only in the driveway, but anywhere else that it's legal for you to park in that municipality. But now that applies to all first responders.
It's funny. I giggle a little bit about it. I mean, you think, does this really actually have to be put into a law? And the reality is it does, because there are HOAs who are so strict. Can you imagine if before you moved into one, you bought a pickup truck and then you move into this community and you had no idea you're not allowed to have one in your driveway?
That's right.
I mean, it's just so interesting, the things that HOAs sort of pick up on a little bit. Not to beat up on them a little bit, but they can get pretty nitpicky on it. And those fines can really add up.
Those fines can add up, and the risks are very high. So these fines, once they hit a certain point, you can actually lose your home. And so I do think it is a fair trade-off. Hey, if this is something you can actually lose your home, a lot of families' biggest investment, there should just be clarity in what the rules are, and there should be it should be even how it's enforced.
So it's interesting because just, again, reading through this, and there is so much into this, so I encourage anyone who lives in an HOA to make sure that you look up this House bill, now a law. But also, there are HOAs that place limits on what you can essentially add to your backyard, like a shed or a building in your backyard that can't be seen also.
That's right. And so that's one of the big features. There's been a number of laws actually over the past 2 years, and some of the legislation last year dealt with what you can have in the backyard. But that is also addressed in this new bills this year. And so if it cannot be seen, if this violation cannot be seen either from an adjacent parcel from the street or from the golf course, then you can't be fined for whatever that violation is. So essentially things that are in the interior of the home that aren't visible to anybody else.
Oh, and also vegetable gardens are mentioned in this, and clotheslines also. I mean, they're really getting down to the nit and gritty.
Nitty gritty, that's right. And that's how it's been for many years. You've got to pressure wash the driveway. You've got to make sure your mailbox is clean. There's a preferred vendor you have to use for the mailbox. And so that touches on another interesting point. This new law addresses preferred vendors, and it says that an HOA can't limit a homeowner's ability to only work with preferred contractors, preferred vendors. You can bring in anyone you want that needs to do work on your home, and I think that's nice.
Well, particularly because, the more bids you can get, the better. And sometimes I think that homeowners were worried that there was some kind of preferential treatment towards some businesses who were giving the preferred, over me being able to go out and maybe even get my brother-in-law, who is a contractor, to come in and do the work. It might get me a better deal.
That's exactly right.
Right.
And you wouldn't believe it, but I've seen that before. I've gone into HOAs where my clients have had disputes, and you start looking and you're auditing the books. And I say, wow, this person that has this great contract, well, guess what? It's the board president's wife, and his best friend has got the yard contract. It's really amazing stuff, so you've got to keep an eye on it.
It's interesting, too, because, they're requiring that HOAs, that there's education, there's financial literacy classes that have to be taken, certain certifications, and also some real serious, issues here, criminal, in fact, if you destroy paperwork or anything like that, that really kind of holds them accountable.
That's right. So it all goes back to that accountability and that transparency we're talking about. And as you mentioned, there can even be criminal penalties for board members for things like influencing elections, illegally influencing elections, destroying or hiding official records, that sort of thing, or kickbacks, insider dealing.
So it's HB 1203 for those of you who live in an HOA and want to do your own research, so that you now know what your HOA is required to do and not do in particular. Adam, thank you for being here. We appreciate you tremendously and everything that Jack's Area Legal Aid does.